I talk for a second?
Excursion into
Coaching. Hello everybody, good morning. I hope most of you had a good sleep. The inspiration still resonates, so thank you everybody for being here. Thank you to our speakers this morning. I always leave so inspired from these conferences. And these presentations always change for me considerably after I've spent some time with you. So thanks for the inspiration. 4 years ago, I was at ECPP in Budapest, and I had challenged the idea that there's a marriage between positive psychology and coaching. I said that they really just started dating. And, well, it's been a lot of years of dating now, so I wonder if maybe we can tie the knot. And that's really what we want to talk about today. Can we have the slides up, please? So, the title of the symposium is Positive Psychology Towards a Unified Theory. My presentation has a little question mark in there, and I'll say a little bit more about that later. But first of all, my gratitude to my esteemed colleagues and speakers today. I've thought about who are some of the leading people who are thinking about the integration between positive psychology and coaching. And they all said yes. So thank you for being here. At this point, a shout out to Dr. Susie Green, who unfortunately couldn't make it from New Zealand, from Australia, to be with us today. But we'll have a good conversation about what are the meeting points between these two fields, and can we arrive at something like a unified theory or framework for what this actually is. So, I've learned over the years that storytelling is a really good way to retain these kind of ideas. So here's my story. Two psychologists walk into a bar. Most of us will have an idea of how that ends. Well, after they fix the bartender, one says to the other, "So what do you do?" And the other one says, "I'm coach." And my horror scenario of that joke is that the other one says, "Ah, cool." And then they change the topic. Because nobody really knows what that means. A lot of us here in this room will know what it means for us, but it usually takes at least a few sentences or half an hour or an hour of a conversation to really figure out what that means. So that's a huge range. If we narrow that down a little bit, you might say, "I'm a positive psychology coach." That narrows it down a little bit, but it leaves it open to interpretation. There's a lot of ways in which positive psychology, if we have an understanding of what that means, can be applied within a coaching context. So somebody might say, my coaching is grounded in, or informed by, or equipped with positive psychology tools, theories, interventions, models. So that narrows it down even a little bit further. But it's still unclear, and if you ask 10 different coaches who use positive psychology in some way, how they work, chances are there are 10 quite different approaches to working. And that's really why we're here. My heart beats for science. My heart also beats for practice. Recently more for practice than for science, arguably. But I think it's important that we come together and we study what works. And in order to know what works, we need to figure out what are we measuring. So, at present, these are fantastic students of ours with Christian over in the back. That was the best photo I could find of you on the internet. So thank you for that, that was delightful. At present, there's no single agreed definition of positive psychology coaching, and even the terminology varies. So we don't really know what we're measuring, even if we were to study and put coaches in the room with clients and say, do positive psychology coaching, and then we measure the outcomes. By the way, I'll go through slides, probably quite quickly at times. I will give you a download link to the extended version of the slides. So feel free to keep your cameras down, but feel free to take pictures. I'll pose when I see one. So, for positive psychology coaching to develop its own identity, we really need a framework so we can measure it, because at the heart of science stands that we want to be clear on what it is. And the basis of such a body of knowledge starts with a widely accepted and standardized definition of the concept. That's from a recent meta-analysis trying to arrive at a framework for positive psychology coaching. And I'll say a few words about that study a little bit later. So, where are we in terms of the science? Well, we all know, or at least most of us know, that they're natural allies. They're really good partners. Coaching has been called the applied arm of positive psychology theory. It's the science at the heart of coaching. But also it's been emphasized we need closer collaboration and integration to really figure out what that means. Dora, in her opening keynote at this conference, posed those questions. What makes life worth living? What makes a good life? How can we flourish? How can we live a good life despite all the challenges that we face? These questions stand at the heart of coaching. And yet coaching is pretty underrepresented at this conference, when actually often it's the thinking space in which policies are made. Change makers create ideas, strategies, how to create that change, often through coaching or arguably in a more efficient way through coaching. So I think it's really important that we understand how can we help people think better about those questions. And that's what positive psychology offers. So Robert Biswas Diener, one of the pioneers in positive psychology coaching, argued that prioritizing science as a method of inquiry is what makes positive psychology coaching so special. Not the only coaching approach who utilizes science, so there's more, but there is a clear emphasis on being informed by the science, using the science to inform our coaching practice. But we don't have a clearly articulated definition. We don't have a methodology, framework, or model. We have many, but none that is agreed upon by people in our field. So we really need more data. I'd love to have something like this. A colleague of mine, Eric De Haan, recently published a book about executive coaching and what works, drawing on the evidence base in executive coaching. So I would love to have this for positive psychology coaching eventually. So we need to measure the outcome. We need to define the approach in order to measure the outcome. So what's the state of play? Well, Google arguably isn't a significant measure, but I find it significant that if you Google positive psychology coaching and definition or define, there's 0 results. I've done this 2 years ago, I've done this again last week, there's still 0 results. There's 2 results for positive psychology coaching definition, but they don't make a lot of references, and there clearly wasn't a process behind there that could be argued as scientific. But there's a lot of people who draw on positive psychology to inform their coaching. So I was tempted to show you about 20 quotes from the literature. I won't, because we have very little time. But I have a presentation that is very much longer, and I'll show you at the end of this presentation where you can find it. What we do find in those quotes and in those articles is an emphasis on well-being, that the approach is evidence-based, that it's informed by theory, of positive psychology theory, that there's a focus on strength. And some also argue the ability to measure well-being particularly, but outcomes and areas for development is particularly helpful, something that positive psychology adds, not uniquely, but particularly with the focus of well-being, they add a lot to coaching practice. So, I mentioned the meta-analysis. Llewellyn van Zyl and his colleagues found common elements in positive psychology definitions. Now they've looked at 2,500 articles. They've excluded most of them, ended up with 24 that they've included in the meta-analysis. And these are the common elements in positive psychology definitions, positive psychology coaching definitions that they have found. I put common in inverted commas because the ones I highlighted here, those are the ones that arguably are within positive psychology. All the rest of those really is just coaching. That's what a good coach does. They don't need to be grounded in positive psychology. And also, out of the 94 themes, only 20% of them mention strength. Only 15% of them mention personal growth and optimal functioning and enhancing well-being. So most of the others, after this, it's 4, 3, 3, 2, 1. So really not very common across these articles. Similarly, in the 8 critical components of the positive psychological coaching model, only the first 2 are arguably within positive psychology. Everything else, any good coach probably does. So Robert again argued a couple of years earlier already that positive psychology coaching is not an endeavor distinct from coaching itself. Rather, it includes coaching as usual. And if you were to see someone do it, you would see all the usual suspects: agenda setting, powerful questions, accountability, any other elements that you would put into good coaching. But overlaid on this foundation of good coaching would be a series of interventions that are grounded in positive psychological science, harnessing positive emotions, developing strength, increasing hope. And while these topics might seem what all good coaches do anyway, a positive psychology coach is explicitly guided by dynamic research insights. And that's a very important point here, that a positive psychology informed, utilizing positive psychology coach would value the science, would be informed by the ever-changing science of positive psychology coaching. In the same article, the theory of Barbara Fredrickson and Losada, which was debunked, the positive to negative emotions ratio, was actually mentioned. So I'm like, that's a dynamic research insight that should have been updated in 2020. So I think it's important that we stay up to date with the science if we want to be positive psychology coaches. Yet every coach can be informed by positive psychology. They don't need to call themselves a positive psychology coach. They would still quite like to know what that means when we say positive psychology coach. Yet they arrived at a framework drawing on all these different themes, and they put this framework together that positive psychological coaching can be defined as a short to medium professional collaborative relationship between a coach and a client, aimed at the identification, utilization, optimization, and development of personal strength and resources in order to enhance positive states, traits, and behaviors. Utilizing Socratic goal setting and positive psychological evidence-based approaches to facilitate personal growth, optimal functioning, enhanced well-being, and the actualization of people's potential. So if you're a coach here, have a little moment to think how that resonates with you. I reckon there'll be a few who say, that fits what I do, and there will be others who say, mine is a little bit different. So that's the conversation I want to get going. Is this good enough to maybe unite positive psychology coaches? Or do we still have work to do? Another limitation of the meta-analysis is that none of these publications on positive psychology, well, Jan reminded me that this is probably the most important one. This one changed a lot. I wrote this one quite a while ago. This one still is relevant still, but Robert updated his thinking in the last 10 years quite a bit. And these two are written from a practitioner perspective. So these edited volumes arguably add the most, because there's so many fantastic people who all utilize positive psychology in their coaching and write about how that's done, including case studies, including their own models. But none of them were included in the meta-analysis because it's not technically peer-reviewed, certainly not blind. Stringent editing process. Mike and I had to go through a few revisions. Thank you for that, it's a better article for it. But we need to take this into account, right? This is where a lot of the conversation happens. So there are a lot of practice models, well, not a lot, but a few. I'm not going to talk about any of them. I just wanted to show that there's some that are quite complex, some that are relatively simple. There's a step-by-step process that probably is also circular. There's an integrative model that includes cognitive behavioral coaching and principles from ACT, hope theory. And this is the one that came out of the meta-analysis that Van Zyl and his colleagues suggested. There might be your model, and I would encourage you to add this and get it published so that other researchers can actually engage with you and say, that's a model I would like to test and see how it works. Judith Moskowitz mentioned this process that we need to look at efficacy and efficiency, and I think it's the same with coaching models. It's just more complex because it's difficult to measure what coaching does and what we're actually measuring. So Robert already 12 years ago said that maybe it's best framed as having basic tenets rather than a complex functional model of its inner workings. But then it's difficult again to come to an outcome because this can look so different for everybody. And every client that has stepped in my room required a different way of working with them. So some of the open questions that I have and that I would like to pose is, what are the necessary characteristics of positive psychology coaching? In practice, how do we tell coaching and positive psychology coaching apart? What's the added benefit of making these distinctions in a necessarily integrative practice when we already draw in from so many different schools of thought and approaches? I think it's impossible to have a pure positive psychology approach to coaching. And I'm not sure if that exists or will ever exist. And if we claim to be evidence-based, we really need more evidence. So what works in positive psychology coaching? And what are we measuring? Are we measuring positive psychology coaching? Or are we measuring a particular coach delivering a version of positive psychology coaching? Does it necessarily focus on well-being? Do we need more independent researchers? I see a lot of research done by coaches looking at their own coaching model and getting good outcome studies, but if another coach were to try and replicate it, I'm not so sure if we would get good results with it, or results that are significant or meaningful. I need to finish up, right? Good. That's the question I want to ask our panel later. What is coaching as an underlying challenge? Research issues, I already mentioned. There's terminology issues, what do we actually call it? And the way forward is for us here to collaborate. Rob made that argument before already, long time ago. We need to go and work with each other, the practitioners and the researchers. So here is a very long version of the talk I just gave. And this is the picture you want to take. These are the slides. I've added all of those quotes that I didn't get to mention. I'll give you a moment. I run a coaching lab where you can see positive psychology coaching in action, and I think it's important that we see it and not just talk about it. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yannick. It's so lovely to be here. I was so excited to be on this stage. Now that I'm here, I can't see anything. It's just too bright, but I know there's people out there. So lovely to be here. Thank you, Yannick, for posing the questions. Thank you for putting this panel together. And thank you, everyone, for your interest. I was so excited to see how many people are going to be here at one of our really coaching sessions around positive psychology. So I'm delighted to see some of you here. So for my presentation, I've actually included some of my own photos. I was thinking, what's a good way to try and connect with people? So there's a few drawings. I was inspired by Mike. He did some drawings for his presentation. But seriously, every session I've been to has been inspiring me and changing my thinking. So I just want to share a few of my own answers to some of the questions just posed about what is positive psychology coaching, and I'm going to share 3 ideas about what is positive psychology coaching. So I'm going to share with you first what I consider to be my most useful theory. I've developed my own theory about coaching and positive psychology, so I wanted to share that, and this has been very successful. So the question was, how do these two things fit together? And already one thing I've changed is the positive psychology one is much bigger than the coaching psychology one. So here's my theory, and I shipped this first at Melbourne. And this is my theory about beer and king prawns. So I was in Mexico City one day giving a presentation, and wherever I am, I like to go try the local stuff. I want to go see what's going on, what's the local stuff. I went into a restaurant and I said, could I have the menu? And they said, do you want the English menu? And I said, no, give me the local, I want it in Spanish. I didn't speak a word of Spanish. And then I'm looking down the menu, and I saw cervezas con camarones. And I couldn't make it out. And I was like, that means beer and king prawns. Great, 2 of my favorite things. And then when I got it, this is a true story, this actually happened. And one of the rules I have, I'm a coach, I do a lot of self-reflection. One of my rules is you start something, you finish it. So I had lukewarm beer, and you know what I love is crisp cold beer. And I had soggy king prawns, and what I like is crispy king prawns. And that just got me thinking about coaching and positive psychology as well. 2 of my favorite things. But why is this my most successful theory? Because I've been offered free beer ever since. Afterwards, people come and say, hey, you said you like beer, do you want to grab a beer? So that's why it's got some utility, this theory. But to be serious, I don't like the idea we lump the whole thing together. There's some things which are primarily positive psychology concerns and interests, and they should be studied. And there are some things which are coaching psychology areas of interest, but that area of overlap, that's what we're talking about, Yannick, and there's huge potential and promise within that. What I'm excited about the promise is the integration of the two fields is also about supporting the integration for our clients. There's a beauty of we integrate as practitioners, but the outcome is we support our clients, the people we serve, we support them to integrate as well. And I hope you'll see what I mean with the examples that I'm going to share. So this is the only photo you're probably going to see. Robert's told me never share this photo. This is Robert Biswas Diener in lederhosen. Right. I just shared my best theory with you. I didn't see a single camera. I shared a photo of Robert. But I'm wearing lederhosen as well. I'll note that. This is another true story. I said to Robert, I said, if you promise to do the same, when we go to the airport in Munich, we're going to still wear the lederhosen and the whole outfit. And I wore that all the way back to London Heathrow. And you know how long it takes to go through London Heathrow? It takes longer if you're wearing this. Anyway, positive psychology coaching, here's our definition. And I love working with Robert. I love working with anyone, actually. That's the best way of learning. We challenge each other, we think together, and this is our latest definition. I'm proud of this definition because we're highlighting and being explicit about a parallel focus on well-being and achievement. I came from the world of coaching, but my biggest critique of coaching is we're obsessed with goal attainment. Sometimes we're pursuing goals at the expense of well-being, and that can't be right. Ethically, morally, in no way can that be right. So this is our definition, this idea of a parallel focus on achieving, and thanks Mike Steger, meaningful goals, whilst also improving the quality of their lives. What's different about my coaching practice? I contract differently. I say when I'm going to coach somebody, I'm interested in you achieving your goals, and I have an interest in your well-being and the well-being of those close to you. That's changed my practice. Let me share another model. So one way, I think positive psychology coaching, and look, we can come up with lots of theories and models, but for me that's at the heart of it. Well-being and performance, or well-being and success. The other is this model, we call it coaching for alignment. And although this was before I was interested in positive psychology coaching, I now look back and realize this model is an integrative model. And this is a coaching model where we start with discovery. We start with tell me about you, tell me what you're proud of. We raise awareness, this awareness part of thing. What's going on for you at the moment? What with a focus on what's positive? This is the only coaching model I'm aware of where there's no goals. There's no goals in this coaching model. What we're interested in is what is your positive intention for the future. That's that next intention. And then you were talking about hope, Bertrand. Pathways. We're about increasing, coaching is about increasing hopefulness. So then we talk about, if that's your positive intention for the future, what are the possible pathways? Let's get them to think about pathways. And then our biggest contribution in this model is what we call the alignment wheel. Remember I was talking about integration. This is a coaching model that's all about helping you to integrate your values and your principles with what it is you do on a daily basis. It's about helping you to live your life, live a good life probably, and live a life that's according to your values. So whatever the pathways are, we would check the pathways against this alignment wheel. How does that pathway, how does it impact the environment? How does it impact on important relationships on your life? Because another critique of coaching is it's too individualistic. Coaching almost says, what do you want and how are you going to get it? No, this model says, what do you want and how are you going to get it and what impact will that have on important relationships, on important considerations, on the system, on the ecosystem? We ask those questions. And then finally, like hopefully every coaching model, it's still about behavioral change. So we say, so what effort are you going to put in so that you can come closer to living according to your positive intention? So that's the model. And this is the wonderful Raja Allaho, the person that I worked with to develop this model. The original book is called Coaching in Islamic Culture. And it was a book about how to help people who wanted to live their lives according to their faith. It doesn't have to be a religious model. It can be for anybody who chooses to live their life according to their values and their principles. So for me, this is an example of positive psychology coaching. It's integrative. It brings together what's meaningful and also what's the impact you're having on a daily basis. Wouldn't it be lovely if we could all live our lives according to our values? Imagine that was happening. Your values. Every day, every interaction was informed by what we know to be true, what we know is important. And this is a kind of coaching to facilitate that kind of living. And the third model. This is the most recent model. We call it positive health coaching. So here's positive psychology again, but now we're adding coaching psychology. The third element, lifestyle medicine. Now, who's familiar with lifestyle medicine? Could you raise your hands? Anybody familiar? A few people here. Lifestyle medicine. I discovered this and I thought, oh my goodness, here's something so critically important. And in this integration, what happens? What does positive psychology bring? We've talked about this, science of optimal functioning. Why would we not bring that into conversations about human beings? Now, coaching psychology, we underplay the benefits of coaching psychology. People are like, oh, it's a methodology for bringing about change. That's only a tiny part. What is coaching's contribution is the way we interact with people. Coaching, for me, is a very respectful way of supporting people to bring about change. It's non-prescriptive, a non-prescriptive way. That's so important for the field of positive psychology. Yes, of course, research-informed. Yes, of course, evidence-based. We still don't want to just tell people, you need to be doing these things. Because that's not a respectful way of doing it. And it doesn't lead to sustainable change. So that facilitative stance is what coaching brings to positive psychology. Of the working with, the idea of co-construction. Working with, being respectful. What does lifestyle medicine bring? Well, it brings the focus on physical. How can we sometimes lose sight of that? Maybe because it's called positive psychology. But there we go. Physical and psychological health. And if you're interested in what is lifestyle medicine, there's 6 pillars. And I've hand-drawn these for you. Manage stress, 6 pillars. Focus on relationships, little hearts. And thank you for everybody here. I've built some lovely relationships, reconnected with people. Thank you. Eat healthy, the apple, be active, improve your sleep. Yeah, for those of you who were leaving with me at 1 a.m., yes, improve your sleep. And avoid risky substances. I'm not even going to comment on that. So, I just wanted to share with you, like Yannick said, we're interested in practice. If this isn't making a difference, 3 examples, a new definition of positive psychology coaching, that integrative model, which is about coaching for alignment, and what we're calling positive health coaching, where I'm at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. We're launching a new master's in positive health coaching coming this September. Thank you so much for this chance just to share a few ideas. Yes, that was me on a motorcycle. That's my favorite place to be after this, after being here. On the back of a Harley is my second favorite place to be. So Instagram is Coach on a Motorcycle. We've got a great team at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland and a wonderful person called Grace who looks after our Twitter handle. And that's at RCSI Health Plus. And if you wanted to do a act of kindness today, it would be to follow at RCSI Health Plus, because every time we get 10 new followers, Grace is delighted. So please do us a little favor and just follow us. So thank you so much, and please do stay connected.
I must admit I'm really, really excited about your artistic talents. I'm just wondering whether you drew this before or after the party. But they're really great. Well, let's continue the conversation. A couple of more ideas about this interesting relationship between positive psychology and coaching. Is it really a friendship, a marriage, a live-in relationship, etc.? So let's consider those possible choices. And as we know from history of this long-standing relationships, they managed to get on quite all right. As Yannick was mentioning, for years already, you always would have people present in the coaching conferences coming from the positive psychology field, people basically coming from the coaching field, always contributing, etc. So they really got on quite well because there was a lot of commonality. a lot of sort of shared vision in the way we approach things. What is really interesting, if we look at the development of the whole history of coaching, is that we will find that the third generation of coaching psychology, a coaching generally proposed by Tony Grant, who is also dealing nowadays with us, already talks about this integration of focus on performance and well-being, already in 2010. So one of the questions I'm asking, to what extent positive psychology coaching is not actually just an evolution of coaching in some way. And what we find, if you look, for example, at some of the most popular or perhaps most commonly used coaching approaches, we do find positive psychology coaching being quite there on the app, already in the third position in terms of the coaching approaches being used. And we already mentioned quite an exciting definition by Van Zyl. Of course, we can expand it, etc., extend it, and capturing these different tendencies. I will not dwell on the book today, because you already did. So, however, I think the difficult integration between positive psychology coaching is there are some fundamental differences between these two fields. And if I had to sum up these differences into something really short, I would say the differences are precisely based on science. In positive psychology, fundamentally, we are looking at what works for many people in general, right? And the more people, the better, right? The more people we have, the more commonalities we find, what works for many people in general. And of course, when we are coaching, fundamentally what we're interested in is what works for this person in front of me right now. And of course, it's great to be excited about many people in general, but it doesn't mean it works for this particular individual. They may be an outlier. This one we excluded from the data because it just didn't help the general picture, right? So when we are working fundamentally with these scientific methods of research, I mean, where we are in positive psychology, we're still very much in the beginning of understanding of this fundamental human activity fit and how to really find the best fit for positive psychology interventions, for example. And of course, the right answer is always based on what research tells us. The right answer in coaching fundamentally is based on what this individual in front of us decides to do, right? And so I think just of drawing on these contradictions, I would say, that was always my challenge of the integration between positive psychology and coaching in a sense. So how do you, I mean, in positive psychology coaching, we might want to bring all these wonderful validated interventions and get our clients to fundamentally use them, right? Great. So do we tell them what to do? Yeah? That's really a definition of coaching, right? We tell people what to do. Go and try that. Okay. What about autonomy? Okay. What about decision-making, personal choice? What about them coming up with their own solution, which is kind of really fundamental in coaching? So this is really that sort of contradiction I've been struggling with fundamentally. How do we resolve this prescription autonomy sort of not quite sitting well together? Because we do know what works, so go and try it. So drawing from almost this question, what are the options of the integration? What are the options of relationships we can find between these two disciplines? So, very simple, some propositions, and we can consider a lot of them a little bit further. Option one, fundamentally using positive psychology coaching, yes, as a process protocol, drawing on different models that many of us are developing or bringing together, with very often explicit recommendations of positive psychology interventions. We know it works, go and try, right? And so many models we've been mentioning, for example, Yannick and Christian, etc. One of the pretty good models derived from the systematic review of the literature by Van Zyl. I know this wonderful person is here, I've never met you yet. So if you are out there somewhere, I would like to meet you personally, by the way. So, because I know you've been having a presentation. So, positive psychology coaching model as a process model and based fundamentally on recommendation, potentially undermining this question of autonomy. Option two, which is the direction of travel currently proposed by Robert Biswas Diener and the person sitting here, one of the directions of travel, is fundamentally using positive psychology as an underlying knowledge base behind coaching. So having that knowledge base through formal training, understanding of the literature, understanding of the research, and this training that basically coaching psychologists or positive psychology coaches have inform the way we ask questions. So there is no prescription, but the knowledge, the underpinning knowledge, informs how we are having conversations. A very sensible way to go as well. Fundamentally resolving this autonomy, prescription, contradiction, right? Fundamentally. Interesting. And the third way I've been toying with as well, and that's sort of currently my preferred way, and it's sort of coming from my passion of resolving this contradiction, is utilizing tools, different tools, that enable us to put the conversation on the table without ever being prescriptive. So that's sort of the way I've been doing this, and many of you know I'm really, really passionate about the development of tools. The reason I'm so passionate about it is precisely because it enables us to avoid this dilemma. We have options out there. Are they of interest? And if yes, how would you like to use it in any way? So there is no prescription. So it's a springboard for coaching conversation. So for example, I don't know, many of you, I'm sure, in your coaching careers would have tried to use different scales, right? I mean, have you ever tried using any of the scales in coaching conversations? Please raise your hand. You have. People get really excited, right? Clients love it. You just stick a scale in front of them, empirically validated one, and really enjoy the conversation. I mean, I've tried. It doesn't work for me. Really doesn't work. It can be, obviously, it's a preparation for conversation, can be integrated in a coaching conversation, but I fundamentally find that the energy just goes flat, right? So which is why, for example, I much prefer having some of the visual indicators in front of me and letting the client walk around these indicators and going far further in evaluation, for example, of their well-being, just based on something without being prescriptive. Which of these indicators talk to you? Which ones are of interest for you? Why? How would you position yourself? What is missing from the picture? Etc., etc. Or for example, my favorite ones, really integrating the PPIs into coaching conversation. The reason it was my obsession at one point, real obsessions, like how many PPIs are out there. So I just went out, looked for all the meta-analysis, got all the PPIs which are effective and put them in a pack of cards, by the way. Kind of, that's a story. Took a couple of years. So the reason I did is precisely to enable choices without being prescriptive. And what's really interesting, there is one paper I'm really, really excited about, even though it is a specific sample and obviously has many limitations. But the paper I'm really excited about that recently came out was a paper on giving the client the choice of positive psychology intervention. And what is really interesting is people who had the choice of intervention, who actually used autonomy, and we've heard about autonomy today a lot. These people fared far better on their outcomes because of using their autonomous choices. So these are some of the ideas, some of those ways of integrating, some of the ways of talking, for example, of positive psychology, for example, positive psychology interventions in the workplace, etc. And that's hopefully going to start or continue this conversation. And obviously, yes, I will mention this wonderful book in case you haven't seen it yet. So thank you very much for your participation, and I hope we'll have a bit of time of conversation afterwards. And welcome to Gudrun. I cannot pronounce her name because I've tried. We only know each other for about 10 years, right? Gudrun, please welcome. Thank you.
Oh, what a privilege and pleasure to be here with you. I had imagined myself to be in a small, narrow room, doing my thing, and now I'm standing here in a big scene. So proud. So my name is Gudrun. and maybe you can try to pronounce it, it's actually Gudrun. And nobody has yet in this conference managed to do that. So maybe you can, try. Positive psychology coaching, could it possibly be a solution to how we train leaders in the future? That is my theme today. And why am I here? Well, I fell in love with positive psychology in 2009, and I never looked back, right? So it was just straightforward. And then I became a coach, executive coach. And after that, I took my master in positive psychology with Dr. Ilona Boniwell. Thank you, Ilona. So, what we're going to look at today is a model that I did while doing my thesis. It has not been researched, so I'm going to go more to the practical side of things. But if there is a researcher out there who wants to cooperate with me, I would be so grateful for that. So I do have some testimonials from clients instead. All right. So, just take this slide in, because change is rapid, it is like nature itself. And I often say to leaders, because I have a leadership program now, that change is the only thing that you can really be secure about today. Everything is changing. It's changing fast, and after COVID, it's even changing faster, right? So sometimes I say, COVID was like hitting the fast forward button in our society. Everything changed like that. And when I think about the last 2 years in my life, I go like, oh my goodness, is it really, so much has happened, right? And I just want you to take that image in. Change is nothing new about change, right? Because change is like nature, right? So we have to adjust to that rapid change. So when I was looking at researching about the qualities or the skill set of leaders for the 21st century, that was my final project, I looked at, what is ahead? We have to be prepared, right? So we have to think about the things that is ahead of us so we can prepare leaders for the new tomorrow, right? So one of the things that I found out, pre-COVID, because I did my master's thesis in 2019, I could see a lot of things. I'm not going to dwell too much on this. You know all about these things. It's the climate change. It is the skill gap. If you know a lot of seniors in the job markets, they are having difficulties about the rapid change of technology. So we need to teach them a lot of time, and money is going to go towards education in the next years. I cannot even pronounce that. I'm just going to go for the robot thing. So the robots are taking over a lot of jobs, and that means that people are losing their jobs, right? But new jobs are also on the rise. So there is hope in that. We are going to face for the next 15 years the biggest reconstructure of the workforce we have ever experienced. I don't know if you know about these things, right? So I thought it was important to take this message out to you guys. Of course, we have the gig economy. 1/5 of all employees in the UK today, they work inside of the gig economy. And then we have the generation gap as well, And sometimes I joke about it because I mainly work with leaders, and they are around my age. That is the X generation, right? So from 1960 to 1980, myself born in 72, and they call me the Y whisperer, like the horse whisperer, because I'm always trying to translate between the generations. What do they mean? When are they going to work? They say about the Y generation. Why is it important to talk about emotions at work? And they're so confused about these things, right? Because my generation, we just worked. We got a job description and we went off, right? So, a lot of misunderstanding between generations. But what has happened after COVID? So, of course, you all know about this, the big resignation, right? So people are leaving their jobs. Yeah, after COVID, why are they doing that? Well, mostly all of my clients are experiencing existential crisis. They come to me, coaching, and they say, is this really the man I want to be married? Is this really the job that I want to do? And they just resign, They go like, I don't want to do this anymore. So it's kind of like, I want to refer to Matrix, which Mike Steele was talking about. We have been waking up, by a sense, right? So a lot of things are like moving around. People are moving around from one relationship to another, from one job to another, etc. Of course, and you know this that, well, at least in Iceland, I can say that the numbers of anxiety and depression, especially in young people in Iceland, are on the rise, like a rocket. So that's also something that we have to deal with. And then the Generation Zeta, I have 3 of those at home, born after 2000. They are like the upgraded version of Y. Extremely demanding. They know their rights. They come and they say to the boss, "What can you do for me? Is it fun to work for you?" So, if I'm going to work with you, I have to have flexibility. I want equality. I want fairness. You cannot lie to me, etc., etc. So, the demands on leaders today are extreme. They are extreme. All right. So, what can we do? What can we teach them? I mean, all of us here, because we love positive psychology coaching, right? So, how can we combine those 2 things? And I want to say from my research, I could see, that there's a rise on the soft skill. Okay. But I have to say, and I want you to remember this, that soft is the new tough. That's it. So, what do I mean when I talk about the soft skills? Well, active listening, AKA coaching, I think. Interpersonal skills, looking inside, who am I? What am I bringing towards people? Emotional intelligence as well. Building trust, psychological safety, engagement and feedback. And then I also mean having the challenging conversations, right? And then you have to know who you are at that point when you're going to face somebody like that. Meaning and purpose, of course. Resilience, one of the most hot topics that I teach today. Resilience, adaptability. So creativity and innovation as well. So many of those are on the rise. And I think actually that it has never been as great opportunity as right now for us to take charge, to fill the gap, right? To step forward, to do something about all these beautiful researches you have. Okay, so I just want to show you a glimpse of my model. So my model consists of 2 rounds. Please, researchers, come and work with me. So inside there, the inner circle is about the growth of the person itself. That is the leader, So we dig into the strengths, we dig into the resilience, we dig into traits on trust, psychological safety, conversations, coaching, and so on and so on. And I have 2 minutes, oh my God, okay. And then the outer circle is more about their relationship with their employees, right? So what I did is that I combined these things in that way into this leadership model, right? And I've been doing this now for 5 years, I think. I have some fantastic testimonials. I want to show you 2 of those. So it's a lot of text, so I'm just going to go faster. This is Gunnar Leif. She was actually going to be here today, 41 months pregnant, but she had a baby yesterday. That's like, Iceland women in a nutshell. Yeah, so she was going to be here on stage, but this, well, this is what she said, and she wrote me this from the hospital. Crazy. So my experience of using coaching and positive psychology together is a breakthrough for us in training leaders at all levels to be focused on strengthening them as leaders, teach them about trust, psychological safety, engagement, and how they can bring out the best in their people. Right? It has worked magic in so many ways. To both have them into executive coaching, which I does, and teach them the coaching skills so they can, use that with their employees. So when I train myself, I use a lot of team coaching, right? So I'm always using the coaching technique myself when I'm training. This is one of the things that Ilona taught me a long time ago. And I want to say that she says the human leader training has brought us towards being the best workplace in Iceland. I have to say. So the reason why she's standing there with the president of Iceland is because, yes, I have to finish, it's because she was voted the best middle manager in Iceland 2022. Very proud. The other one comes from the Blue Lagoon, which is a place that I hope you hopefully all have engaged in while being here in Iceland. If you haven't, I recommend it. And I'm not going to go into details, but what I thought was so amazing is when she says, yes, by identifying and emphasizing the leader's strengths, like I did, they also have gained a better understanding of themselves as leaders. And when I heard that, I felt like, oh, yeah, that's what we want as well, right? We not just want to make them good leaders for employees, we want them to get to know themselves, right? Okay, so, Think Vitler, if you haven't seen that one, I also recommend it. So when I was building this presentation, I was thinking about this gap. Yeah, this gap that needs to be filled with us. Yeah. If you think about the soft skills, I just want to ask one question. Which one of you are working in the domain of those soft skills that I mentioned? If you can raise your hand. Yeah. Okay, so I would say at least 70% of you inside of here. So I encourage you to do that, and I want to finish with my favorite quotes of all quotes from Dr. Viktor and Frank, and it's also about the gap, right? So between what is happening on the outside and the inside world of yourself, there's space, this beautiful space of deciding who you want to be in the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Christian, Ilona, Gudrun. So we have another 10 minutes. We could probably sit here for days, but let's try to make the best of it. I guess the core of the question I would like to hear your thoughts on is this dilemma I have around, is it crucially important that we have a unified model, some framework that's specific enough that we can measure outcomes? Or is that in the way of what many coaches cherish so much, the autonomy, the freedom, the diversity in approaches that we need to apply when we sit in front of a particular human being that might just be the outlier to all of our data sets? So I wonder what you think.
I have a short answer.
Please go ahead.
I think I worry about once we pin something down that it becomes static, and everything we've heard about in this conference is stay with the research. So I'm a bit skeptical about pinning it down too tightly.
I would actually agree completely. I would think that we can have sort of temporal or temporary definitions moving up with the science and really potentially offering multiple and options definitions and bringing them together with choices also for practitioners.
So I would like to say that I think that autonomy should be the base of everything that we do. Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit? Autonomy should be the base of everything.
I mean, there always has to be the choice. After listening to Richard Ryan this morning, it became more and more obvious, right? That you always have to be the one who chooses your direction, right? And this is what we believe in as coaches, right? So I have done this with teams by using the coaching method while I train. So, yeah.
What do you think?
And what do you think, Yannick?
Personally, I'm very much on the autonomy side.
Yeah.
Probably because there's a big existential foundation in how I approach positive psychology and vice versa. I don't want to pin myself down to a particular process because I think it's in the way of being really present with who sits in front of you. I think it's possible, I'm not against it. We can teach a positive psychology model to a manager or a leader, for example, or a coach who's just starting to coach. I think it's important that they have something to hold on to. It provides certainty, it provides a sense of comfort of, I kind of know what I'm doing. It's limited in what the value of it is, but it's certainly helpful and valuable. But I think once we get beyond a certain maturity in coaching, I just want to be really present with who's sitting in front of me and give them what they need.
True.
And I guess on giving them what they need, that's a question I have as well. One of the components was learning transfer, and you mentioned, well, many coaches tell their clients what to do, or let's reframe, they put some really useful tools on the table for them to consider. And that can be extremely helpful. Well, you want to improve your well-being? Well, here's a bunch of things that you could be doing, and in your context, I could probably recommend a few. Susie Green at some point said, it's the obligation, a responsibility of the positive psychology coach to share the knowledge that we have from the science. And at the time, I was like, I'm not sure how I feel about that, because I want my client to learn, and I want to inspire their learning, but I don't want to give them the learning. So, what do you think?
I think I tried to capture that precisely. I think there is this very thin line between being prescriptive. I think we have the responsibility of sharing knowledge, but without stepping on somebody's autonomy. Which is why I find it so interesting to identify what this line is and how to work around it.
Christian?
Yeah, I agree entirely. I'm thinking, so for the example of health professionals who use positive health coaching, this is the line we're talking about, because health professionals will have information about your health and well-being that's valuable to share. So it's this dancing on this line, because for me, without autonomy, it's not coaching. I want to be clear, no autonomy, we can't even call it coaching. So how to manage that line is really the hardest thing.
So basically, new definition of positive psychology coaching, dancing on the line.
Well, a lot of these people like dancing, it seems.
Yes.
But I have to say, as coaches, we always have to go back to the question. And the essence of the question is the quest, the search. And I really think, if I think about how I train leaders, is that I can give them material, I can give them a thesis, but then I go on with the questions so they can find their own answers, right? So I think you can combine it in that way. So that you have some of the training about the theories, and then you have about the tools, and then they have to choose themselves if they want to use it, how they want to use it, which kind of questions they want to use, and so on and so on. Yeah. So it's the quest.
The question I would want to ask though, because obviously it's nice to be sitting here, but there are many of you here in front of us who are practicing positive psychology coaches. Anybody else has another viewpoint? Yes, please.
Well, hi. Yeah.
Hi. Do you want to?
Kerry. So yeah.
Do you want the mic?
Well, can do. Yeah.
I'll do that.
Hi. Yes, sort of agreeing with what you're saying here, but I also feel that if you're being congruent with your coachees, in a way you're also sort of opening up to them that even though it's evidence-based, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And also that even where there is evidence, it's evidence-based on particular populations. So I tend to kind of offer things up to my coachees as kind of experiments. Let's give this a go. Do you fancy giving this a go? Let's see. It might work, it might not. So I kind of keep that level of openness there. So I just wanted to share that really.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent.
I've just been reminding myself of Simon Sinek's why first, then how, then what. So if the why is open and intentional, why we do what we do, why we choose this profession, the how includes the science and the evidence base, and what includes the methodology or the tools, but should come third after the why gets thrashed out and agreed upon somehow first.
Interesting. Yannick, we've got one here as well.
I've already got mine. So I was a clinical psychologist before I came into coaching, and clinical psychology sort of wrestled with this question for a long time, and has kind of ended up with this sort of strange hybrid model of saying we're sort of reflective scientist practitioners. And what I've liked about that for myself is being a scientist practitioner doesn't mean you're always presenting science, it just means you always know why you're doing what you're doing, based on the science. The practice piece is there's then a sort of a circular motion between the science and the practice, so they're sort of informing one another. And then what I love about the reflective element is that the reflective bit is sometimes when we practice, as a clinician, I sometimes felt that clinical practice was like watching beautiful theories fall to pieces in the real world. And what I like about the reflective piece is that it bridges that gap between very rigorous science and then the mess of life where you're trying to apply it, and therefore constantly coming back. So it keeps us as people right at the centre of that sort of interaction. So I'm really excited about this conversation.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I think at this point we need to close it up. I want to express special gratitude for you guys for being here, for thinking with us. And again, an invitation for you guys. You have an hour now, 45 minutes, an hour, to talk to each other. So can you just, if you're a researcher who's keen to research some of that stuff, could you put your hand up? Could you take a look around? Keep your hands up for a moment. If you're a coach and you'd love to collaborate, have a look around. Great, hands up for coaches who really I got something here, and I know it works because I've worked with so many clients. I'd love somebody to come and work with me to figure that out. Could you have your hands up? Researchers, take a look around.
Yeah.
Now go please find each other, have lunch, talk, exchange whatever you need to exchange, and I'll see you here or somewhere else in 2 years' time.
Great. Well done.
Okay, thanks for listening to another episode of Talking About Coaching. I really appreciate your time, and I hope we were able to spark some interesting thoughts for you. I'm always keen to hear what people are taking from these sessions, so if something shifted for you or your practice, it'd be really lovely if you left a comment or drop me an email at 42@existential.coach. If you'd like to join or continue the conversation, you can do so in our Talking About Coaching community, currently hosted on Facebook. I believe strongly in the generative effect of coaching, and so the purpose of this podcast is to help coaches be better coaches, to give back to the community by sharing what we know, and to generate even more knowledge and connection the best way we know how, through conversations. If you wanted to contribute to this mission, there are a few options. A positive review of the podcast will make it more visible to other coaches, and in turn, I think it will benefit not just them, but their clients, their workplaces, their communities, and the world as a whole. Telling a colleague or a friend about what we do here, perhaps sharing the link to this or another episode with them, I believe that's probably the most powerful way of spreading the word. And you can also support the podcast on Patreon, which will help us to produce more episodes in more regular intervals. So far, it's been very much a labor of love, and I'd love to get to a point where we can turn down paid work in favor of recording another episode. And speaking of which, there are plenty more episodes available, both long-form deep dives into specific topics, approaches, or people, as well as much shorter conversations where we discuss very specific questions from new and from experienced coaches. So have a browse and see if anything piques your interest. And feel free to send us a question or suggest somebody that you think we should talk to. We'd love to hear from you. Now, that's it for today. Once more, thank you for listening, and see you again soon.